We're not prepared, I mean the association organizers, prepared for so many people here, nor I was prepared to give a talk. That's all right. We are hoping that the microphone would arrive. As you know, this was supposed to be a gathering of 15 or 20 people to talk about sexuality and equality. But the main reason that we chose that topic, we wanted to identify sexually active Baha'is. So as soon as we have taken pictures of all of you, you may go. As you know, in my professional life, for a number of years, I have been working on issues of marriage, relationships, and family. And as a psychiatrist, you really never can avoid the subject of sex in discussing different issues with people who come for consultation. There are many reasons why that's the case, and we will talk a little bit about it. Hopefully that clarifies some of the reasons for this interest in sexual matters. However, during the last 20 years or so, I have observed that in our society, there has been continuously greater measure of so-called sexual freedom. Society has begun to look at sexual issues with much more ease, with much greater frequency, without much hesitation at all. And the theory behind all of these has been the finding of psychologists who thought and observed that many of the emotional problems that people had were somehow related to their sexual life experiences. This was particularly true at the turn of the century, when observations by psychologists and psychiatrists such as Freud and his followers showed clearly that a good number of what they call neurotic problems such as physical illnesses which didn't have a cause in physical conditions, problems related to relationships, to even issues of self-confidence, happiness, joy, anger. Many of these things, they were able to trace it back to two kinds of problems. One was sexual repression, which was very common in a highly puritanical society of Europe then, and is very common in many of the puritanical societies of our time now. And the other one was related to enormous degree of abuse, aggression, violence, that one way or another is imposed upon children as they grow up in respect to their sexuality. And in this respect, majority of victims were, of course, girls, but many boys also in many societies have been victims and continue to be victims. So because of these observations, it was thought that at the root of all psychological problems are sexual problems. And added to it is another observation, which one of the major preoccupations of people in general is in respect to their sexual life. When you think about it, you will see for yourselves or for others that you know that the issue of supposedly this is better, is it? Okay. So the preoccupation that people have with matters sexual is not an unusual phenomenon, as we will talk a little bit about it. It is a very understandable issue because, after all, it is very closely related to our growing up and to our being alive and to the continuation of our species. So sex is not all that unimportant. So because of these and other related issues, in psychology and psychiatry and all of those fields, the issue of health and issue of sexuality were very closely related. And it was felt that once people are emancipated from sexual difficulties, that their emotional problems would disappear. So we began to create a kind of a culture and a movement towards sexual freedom. And it reached its beginnings of total freedom when such concepts came up that if it feels good, you should do it, or it is your responsibility, and if two adults felt that they want to have sex, they should have, that these standards of morality and so forth, they were just simply imposed standards by religions that are no longer needed for humanity anyway, and many, many other reasoning. And it was exciting because people felt, okay, now they can have their cake and eat it as well. And that's exactly what the society began to do. And people began to have much more preoccupation with sexual matters, this time in the open. They began to experiment with sexual issues. And for all practical purposes, sexualized the society in which they were living, and we are a part of it. Because if you think about it, our society is a highly sexualized society. Everything, our clothes and cars and coffees and McDonald's and you just name it, somehow it is related and sold to us in terms of sexuality. The whole advertisement industry, the whole area of what they call art and culture, and even sciences. There are some sciences that are sexy and some are not. Okay, and it just has become the very stuff of our society, and we have become much more preoccupied with it than ever we have been in the past. Now, it's interesting that all of these things, nevertheless, the problems related to sexual matters have not decreased. Nevertheless, people have greater, if not greater, the same degree of difficulty in respect to sexual matters. Now, some of the manifestations of it are really very remarkable. For example, in the clinical setting, we see what I can say a deadening of sexual drive. You know, sexuality at one time has been the cause of enormous degree of human excitement and human passion and human drive and human motivation. And while people didn't have sex gradually would be transformed into creative activities of artistic nature, of cultural nature, of even representing a spiritual quest. Many poets, when you read their poetry, you will see that they are talking about conditions in which you don't know where the physical sexual dimension starts and when that union with the beloved, with the capital B, ends, because it is a characteristic of a human being that everything physical can be rendered divine and spiritual. This is the whole phenomena of humanity. What is unique about humanity is that it renders the physical spiritual. There is a prayer by Baha'u'llah in which Baha'u'llah says that thanks God and wonders at the wonder of creation that has allowed the dust which we are made of to raise in the form of hands to supplicate to the beloved. So this is that process of rendering the material spiritual. That's the whole drama of human creation and evolution. That's what it is. Now, this therefore has to manifest itself in all aspects of our life. And one of those aspects is in respect to sexual matters. So briefly, I thought that we should review and to see how that could occur. What are the stages of this rendering of the physical to spiritual? When you think about it, you will see that we as human beings can function and do function at three levels. At one level, we function humans as animals, meaning that we have certain drives, certain instincts, certain desires, and we put them into, we satisfy them. That's one level. If we were to apply that to the issue of sexuality, then at the animal level, there are two issues that are very important. One is a healthy and pleasant body, and the other one is the capacity for pleasure and satisfaction of the sexual drive. Now, if you think about it, you will see that majority of people, when think about sex, they think about those two things. Okay? Hence, the emphasis in our culture on body the beautiful, and hence the emphasis in our culture on the issues of pleasure. And all of these attempts that have been made at improvement of sexual relationships during the last 2 decades or 3 decades are related to these specific issues. Then if we move one step further, higher in our evolutionary process, and we are human as a rational being, a thoughtful being. In other words, a being that doesn't live only according to the rules and dictates of instincts. Then what happens to sexuality at that level also is interesting. We maintain the emphasis on the body and pleasure. Of course, the sexual relationships should be pleasurable and should be in the context of health and being healthy. Of course, there's no doubt about that. But then you move from there and add some new dimensions. What are the new dimensions that you add here to a relationship? And it's very interesting. I should stop here and make an observation which becomes very relevant from here on. That it is my observation that the reason that the sexual problems, in spite of the sexual revolution, have not improved is because equality does not exist in the relationship between the partners. And therefore, usually sex is an arena of either trying to settle the conflicts or, husband and wife have a fight and they decide to resolve it, so they go to bed, try to resolve it. Or try to set the fight in the context of who is going to win. So they go to bed, one wants to have the sex, the other one either denies it or makes sure that it's very unpleasant for the other one. Okay? So it is continuation of the conflict in the relationship. And most of the time is in the context of competition and power struggle, of who is going to win. And usually men try to win through physical, brutal, kind of a brute type of a force. And women find their own ways of winning, which you are more familiar with it than I am. Okay. So it's very interesting that in the context of inequality, sexual relationship has far greater meaning than just simply satisfaction of certain instinctual desires or needs. It goes far beyond that. In the context of human relationships, sex has far more meaning than it does. We were talking about it. But in the context of inequality, the sex actually becomes the battleground for trying to find some degree of justice in the relationship. Now that's very important because in the second stage, namely human as a rational being, in addition to emphasis on the body and the pleasure, there is emphasis on two other things at least. One is the knowledge of the other person, and the other one is feelings of love for the other person. Emotions. We as human beings, rational beings, have capacities of knowledge, love, and will, which are the capacities of our soul. Okay? And we apply these capacities to all aspects of our lives. And one of them, of course, is to our sexual relationships. Many a times, the problems in the sexual relationship is in the context of the partners not knowing each other and not bothering to know each other and being kind of uncomfortable about knowing each other. There are many a men who do not know about their wives and their sexual needs and their method, the ways that they feel gratified and so forth. And there are many women who do not know about their husbands. By and large, people don't talk about it. They are ashamed to talk about it. They feel uncomfortable to discuss it. And they act as though it is something that they should know. And because the other person doesn't know, they become very, very angry with the other person or disappointed with the other person or uncomfortable with the other person. So the process of knowing each other many times is defective in the relationship. And if they don't know, for example, about each other's sexual needs and so forth, how could even they give pleasure to each other? They can't. But then even more important is the issue of love and the way people define love. One of the things that has to happen in the context of equality, and I will refer to that tomorrow in my talk, is that we have to understand love in a totally new way. The definitions of love that people have are not sufficient. One thing we know, that love is not a condition that gives you all happiness and joy and removes all of the pains and difficulties of life. We know, for example, that Baha'u'llah very clearly says that the steed of the valley of love is pain. So the Hollywood definition of love doesn't apply. Okay. There is a new understanding of love have to evolve here. And it's very important because love goes through several stages. And at the beginning, love really is blind. The couple really don't know each other. And the way they look at each other and the way they relate to each other and so forth is very superficial. They are indeed with each other with closed eyes. Okay? That's the beginning of love. But soon thereafter, love moves to the next stage. And that stage is a stage in which the relationship becomes very competitive. The power struggle comes into the picture. Love and power get mixed up. Because the relationship is not equal, power begins to have a very prominent role. Now, this stage in this culture lasts about 75 years. Okay. Because every time I see people coming, they have been married for 2 months and they are 19 and 20 and they have been married for 50 years and they are 70, 90 and 80 and they come and when they talk about love, they are talking about a combination of love and power. And who is loving who the most, who is loving who the least. And on January of 1945, I gave her a gift and she didn't even remember anything to give me. And it just goes back and forth. And people have a catalog of how much they have given and how little they have received all these years. Okay? And then another part of it is, in the context of the authoritarian families, is that love is very conditional. And it's conditional upon obedience. That the husband says, I love you as long as you obey me. As simple as that. You obey me, and I love you. Meaning, I take care of you, I pat you in the back, and a number of things like that. Okay? That's the kind of relationship that people have with each other. So this stage of competitive love, which is really concomitant with the stage of adolescence, it is the most prevalent stage, most lasting stage at this time in our society, because our society also is in adolescent stage. Okay? So it's not surprising. But we have to move beyond this level to the next level. By the way, in this level, usually then you follow the traditional mode of man-woman relationship. The woman sits there until the man approaches them, and then they have to, the power is relegated to the man. And the man has the power and the authority and the initiative and so forth, and the woman waits until that happens. And then the drama is what you experience every day in your life, and either in your own lives or lives of your children or whatever. Okay. Ultimately, love has to move to the next stage. And that next stage is the stage in which the lovers are equal. In a stage in which the lovers cooperate with one another. They know each other. They are aware of each other. Their intimacy is as such that they can apply one of the important principles of Baha'i consultation, namely to be frank with one another. That stage of love relationship, which is the third stage, parallels the relationship of God with us. Think about the way that God is talking to humanity at this stage. He says, love me so I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, in no wise my love can reach thee. Now, isn't that interesting? God, for the first time in the history of humanity, is saying to humanity, now you are mature. Now you are capable of a mature love relationship. Now it should be give and take. It should be reciprocal. It should be unconditional. It shouldn't be based, love me because if you don't love me, then I would reject you. Then you go to hell. Then your life would be miserable. No, this is the kind of a relationships that many husbands and wives we have with each other. That they say, love me, and if you don't love me, you're going to have a really lousy life. Okay? And that's the kind of a thing that no longer is operative in a society, in a humanity, that by the will of God and the imperatives of the history is going to the next stage of its evolution, a stage of maturity. So the love relationship has to change. Our definition of love has to change. Our way of looking at love has to change. And when we don't do that, then it could not be applied to the issue of sexuality. And what happens then in this situation, in these relationships, is that the husband and wife feel rejected or misunderstood by one another. When the love hasn't gone to the next stage, to the mature stage, there is a profound sense of rejection and being not understood. Okay? So at the level of human as a rational being, these issues become very important. And when there is inequality in this level, because adolescence is a very volatile age also, and because it's the age in which love and power is combined, then you have violence. Love becomes mixed with violence. And you see how in our society, love and violence are so closely knit together, so totally intertwined. It's so much so that many psychologists think that the two cannot be separated from each other, that it is a part of love to be combined with be violent and a part of violence to be love. And this is very important. For example, Freud believes that many of the good acts that people do, loving acts that people do, is just simply to sublimate for the violent feelings and drives that they have. Konrad Lorenz, who won Nobel Prize, I don't know for what, well, I don't know, okay? he says that love and aggression are so interrelated to each other that if you remove aggression, you remove love from human society. Okay? Now, this is the stuff upon which the thinking of our time in respect to marriage, in respect to relationships and so forth is established. And then when they are transferred to the day-to-day issues of love, and when you live in a culture that defines love and sex in the same word, with the same word, that they say, let's make love, meaning let's have sex. When you have that kind of confusion of concepts, of ideas, of relationships, of everything, then there is no wonder that we have so much violence in the context of the family and in respect to sexual activities. And I'm sure that you know how prevalent this is, both within the Baha'i community and outside of it. The wife abuse, the child abuse, the incest, all of these issues that now are raising their heads and people are coming and talking about them have been with us for a long time, but they are by no means less prevalent at this time. If anything, they are more prevalent because this is the era in which love and power are so closely intertwined. This is the adolescent age of humanity. And it is the adolescent age of humanity who basically tries to live either human as animals, like that, or humans as rational beings. Now, the next stage, that's the stage that we are trying to go to and evolve to, is the stage of human as a spiritual being. What happens to sexuality at this level? Okay? Again, the issue of the body and the pleasure remains. Of course, that's important. The issue of knowing each other and loving each other, of course, is important and has to be applied. But then, at this level, the knowledge of and love for the other person become combined with spiritual virtues, with kind of qualities that are essential to a spiritualization of life of humanity. What are they? They are issues such as justice, such as equality, such as unity. These are spiritual virtues of our time. And one other thing that is essential for that is truthfulness. Many a times, lovers are not truthful. And when truth doesn't exist in a relationship, enormous problems exist. Okay? And it is through that process that gradually lovers are able to let go of themselves, and at a self-abundance they come in. They can let go of themselves. They can have total trust with each other. They can have a transcendent type of a love for one another. So the relationship, the environment changes. Love, instead of being combined with power, love becomes creative. And it becomes creative in every sense of word, in many, many ways and many senses. So these are some of the thoughts that you may wish to consider. I think I'm going to stop very soon, and we have a little bit of talk. This room is awfully hot. The subject is hot. The air is hot. And people are sleepy. I don't know what to do. But anyway, I was very interested to see that in one of the quotations about relationships in Baha'i family, that certain qualities are identified that are very, very, thank you, very interesting in respect to what we have been talking here. This is from Baha'u'llah. And he's talking about the issue of the family and relationship of men and women. And he says the friends of God must be adorned with the ornament of, now think about it, this is in the context of our relationship with each other as applies to marriage and that aspect of our relationship. It says, the friends of God must be adorned with the ornament of justice, equality, kindness, and love. And you see, kindness and love are separated. Because love is that force that allows us to evolve and grow and mature. And kindness is another human quality. So then he goes on to say, as they do not allow themselves to be the object of cruelty and transgression, in like manner they should not allow such tyranny to visit the handmaidens of God. Because Baha'u'llah, the manifestation of God, knew the tyranny, the absolute tyranny that is visiting the handmaidens of God. And he specifically said that we should develop the qualities of justice, equity, kindness, and love, and do not allow such tyranny to visit the handmaidens of God. Tyranny of cruelty and transgression. Okay. I am sorry for this disjointed number of remarks because, as I said, I by no means was ready for this. But let's have a little bit of discussion and interaction and to see whether we could. Is it possible to open those doors there and there so that we have a little bit of current and air? Thank you. All of the doors, if it's open, this would be really nice. And that door also. Okay, anybody wants to make any comment or questions? Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned at one point that love was competitive and conditional, implying, well, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours, and if you don't, then I won't, and so on. This kind of
That's right.
economy of love.
Yes.
And that at a higher stage, love is unconditional. Yet at the same time, at that higher stage, you said that it was based on a mutual reference.
Yes, mutual cooperation. Yeah, but
what's the difference between that reciprocity
yes.
and that demanding?
Well, first of all, I didn't mention unconditional on purpose, okay? My understanding of love, development of love, is that it has 4 stages, okay? The first stage is the blind stage, okay? That we really love each other, but the love that we have is not based on knowledge of each other, okay? A certain attraction has taken place, and somehow we are together, but we really don't know each other. Then, as we begin to get to know each other, we go to the competitive stage. And it is a dynamics of growth that we go through that, okay? The competition means that both individuals are totally self-centered. I am thinking of myself. Am I getting enough love or am I not? Am I a good lover or am I not? Okay? In other words, when I give or when I receive, I think of myself. I am preoccupied with myself. But when you go to third phase, which is the phase of cooperation, I think of the other person. Okay? Not of myself, but of the other person. Both reciprocal, but one is self-centered. The other one is the other directed towards the others. These are the different stages in the love relationship, especially in the context of the marriage. But then the fourth stage is the unconditional love. The unconditional love, the reason I didn't mention it, I have had experience over the years that when I bring the couples and give them a kind of description of the 4 stages and say, put yourself somewhere, they always put themselves at the unconditional love. Okay? It didn't matter what they were doing, why they came, they fight, they do everything. And you say, where are you on that? And so, unconditional, of course. So I decided, well, there's no use of putting it there. Unconditional love is that stage of development and maturity and growth that unless somebody really, by grace of God, jumps it, is the result of lifelong work and is not something that just comes about like that. And I think usually we fool ourselves if we say that we have reached to the level of unconditional love. The way I think about unconditional love is the love of Abdul-Baha. Okay? Now, that love is really, we know that it is not attainable by us, and even getting closer and closer and closer to that example is going to take enormous amount of time and growing up and maturity and spirituality.
So the next question then is: are these four stages necessary? I mean, does one have to go through the blind love in order to achieve the next step, or is it just this is kind of what, naturally what we see happening?
I wish I could say that it was something that wasn't necessary. But I feel that it is the dynamics of the growth of love and is very much related to the dynamics of our own psychological and spiritual growth.
So if I want to get to stage 4, I better let myself go and...
I suggest that you do that, yes. Yes. We don't want to say where you are, but I definitely think we should. Okay, while he's doing that, any other question? Okay. Yes?
I want to just express that don't you think a love from mother for a child
Okay.
from the beginning unconditional
Okay.
reach the last stage?
Now, that's a very important question. The question is asked, what about the love of mother toward the child? Abdul-Baha, as you know, here I have been describing stages of love. You are asking about different kinds of love. Abdul-Baha says that there are 4 kinds of love. There are love of God to humanity, which shows itself in the form of all of the bestowals of God upon us. The most great one of them, of course, is the gift of the manifestation. He gives us the gift of life, the gift of existence, of coming to this world. Everything is created for us, and then he gives us the manifestation of God, and these are the signs of love of God for us. Then is the love of God, love of us human beings for God, which manifests itself in the form of us accepting the love of God, making ourselves recipient of love of God. Okay? Then comes the love of God for the essence of God, the very reality of God, which, if you want to translate it into human existence, because we are created in the image of God, is that the need for every human being to love his or her own essence and reality. Everyone here has been created by God, and everyone here is lovable, and everyone here is uniquely beautiful and magnificent. But how many times we say to God, God, you goofed, you created me wrong. Okay, this is wrong with me, and that's wrong with me, and that's wrong with me, and so forth. And we just are not able to love that fundamental reality that is within us, which is our soul, which allow it to evolve and to grow and to be spiritualized and to see the beauty of this human being that is there, which is us, which is every one of us. And the 4th kind of love, he says, that is the love of human beings for human beings, which he says is mere acquaintance, is mere knowing each other, is not a true love, is temporary, it would not last, unless it is true love of God. Unless the partners both make their love eternal by loving the eternal, which is God. Okay? Now, these 4 types of love are depicted in all aspects of our lives. Okay? So the parent-child relationship, at one level, reflects the God-humanity relationship. Mother shows the love to the child unconditionally by giving and giving and giving. Okay? And the child shows love by receiving. But how many times parents get upset, profoundly disturbed, when they try to calm their child and the child doesn't calm down. And then somebody else picks up the child and the child calms down. And the mother or the father says, he doesn't love me. Okay? Or try to make the child smile and the child doesn't smile. Or the child smiles and the mother says, he loves me. Or the father says, he loves me. Why? Because it's a response back. So all of these things then becomes problematic depending on where we are in our understanding of love relationship, in our own maturity, you know. So yes, love of mother for the child in its purest form is unconditional, okay? But because we are not mature individuals, because we are constantly growing, because we are constantly evolving, then that love relationship becomes different, okay? Depending on who we are, where we are in our evolution, you see.
It's not automatic.
Nothing is automatic, yes.
I think that's what many people think, that
That's right.
love it without...
No, you see, the desire, the wanting, that is automatic. The bonding that takes place is automatic. But you see, while for animals, the bonding is instinctual. For human beings, it's dependent upon our knowledge, love, and will. And our knowledge can be distorted knowledge. Our love can be a distorted love. And our will can be destructive. Or it could go the other way around. So nothing in human existence is automatic. We are given the authority and responsibility and so forth. There and then there.
A question about sex again.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it's not my favorite topic.
Yes, it looks like that. Oh, well. Don't listen to these people. Go ahead.
You talked about sex only within the context of marriage. I think from a Baha'i point of view, that might be the only correct way to look at sex. However, there are a whole bunch of us, like myself, who are single. And unfortunately, some of us remain single for quite a while, for some reason or another. And the issue of love and sex is very important to us, probably a little bit more important to us than those who are married and successfully married. And I was wondering, anything other than taking a cold shower?
No, but that's a very important question. That's a very, very important question. How are we going to deal with this issue of sexuality? Let me say, to begin with, to calm you down, I don't have an immediate solution, an answer to the problem. However, I have some thoughts and reflections that I share with you, may be of help. It seems that we human beings are able to do anything in our lives if we have a vision of why we are doing it. One of the unique characteristics of a being human is that when we understand why something should be done, then we find in ourselves the capacity to do it. Okay? Now, give you some examples of differences of behavior under same circumstances. Suppose there is an earthquake, and suppose you have a broken leg or broken arm. Or forget about earthquake, suppose you are skiing and you have a broken arm. Well, what is the natural thing to do under those circumstances is to immediately arrange that you're taken to the hospital and your broken arm taken care of and something given for pain and you are comforted and so forth, right? It's all natural. Suppose you had the broken arm in an earthquake. Now you can do a number of things. You could get up and go try to see whether you can find somebody to take care of your arm. And forget about everybody else that is there. You could look around and to see that somebody has been killed and it looks as though that his wallet is there and some money is there, and go and pick up the money and put it in your pocket. And then go and, take it from others. You could do that also. You could also look and to see somebody else is injured and go on to help him. You could even become very involved in helping of the other person. So much so that you forget about yourself and you become totally preoccupied in helping other people. All of these and other possibilities are open to you. Which one you would do? You would do the one that matches your view of what is really the most important thing about you. That if you think that you are a human being with spiritual capacities and spiritual qualities, that you have a mission in life, that you have an objective in your existence, that you want to go in a certain direction, then you would do the latter. On the other hand, if you thought that life is a short process in which you are here to get the best that you can and the heck with everybody else, you would choose some other alternative of what you do. Okay? All of these are different aspects of human behavior. Now, the issue of sexuality it falls into that category. It seems that if we realize that our whole life, the purpose of our life, is for us to evolve, to make the material the spiritual, to make the physical divine. Okay? If we are engaged in that process, if we have that vision, then we realize that we are engaged in a creative act. We have to create something. And any time that you want to create something, you have to have discipline. You have to go through pain. You have to postpone your desires and sit there and allow yourselves to be engaged in the act of creativity. Creativity is not an easy process. When you create your life and your spirituality is not an easy process. So my limited understanding of these teachings that are given in the writings of the faith and other religions, but here we're talking about Baha'i faith. My understanding is that these disciplines that are put upon us are for the purpose of allowing the human being to move to, you see, the drama of humanity is that we have one foot in the physical world and one foot in the spiritual world. We are in between the two worlds, between the physical and the spiritual. We are the highest of the animals and can live like animals. We are the beginning of the divine and we become the spiritual. This is our choice. And these disciplines, be it related to sexuality, be it related to any of those things, these disciplines would help us immensely to move from one to the other. And when we have the vision, it is not painful any longer. When we don't have the vision, it is a chore. It is awfully difficult, it is awfully painful, and so forth. That's at the spiritual level. Now at the psychological level, also I have to say something, what I have observed. Sexuality, as I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, is not only in human beings, is not only a physical drive and instinct. Sexuality is a potent source of motivation, of passion, of excitement, of being alive, okay? Of tenderness, of beauty, of all of those qualities that we feel that are so marvelous. They all, one way or another, can be applied to sexuality, okay? Now, when sexuality, that potent source, is abused, when it is used beforehand, it is abused, is overused, is all of those. When that happens, in essence, life goes out of it. And what I see in practice is a lot of lifeless people, sexually speaking. You see people who have been very sexually active during the 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years of age. Then they get married and they come and they simply do not have anything left in them. Because what has happened is that an abuse has taken place. And that abuse has profound effects on them. I wish we had time more to talk about how that works. So everything is not as magnificent as people, especially people who are not in marriage, think it is. Okay? There are enormous difficulties in sexual relationship in the marriage because of this and other related reasons. The third thing that I like to say is what I understand the future of Baha'i communities would be. Baha'i communities of future, it seems to me, would be organized very differently. And it seems to me that the long period of adolescence that has been created basically in a pleasure-oriented North American society would not necessarily be there. Marriages, I think, would take place much earlier. The society would create opportunities for women and men to live a much more equal life, to have much greater assistance in raising their children, in getting married, in going to work, in education. And all of the burden wouldn't be falling on the shoulder of one or the other. Right now, many marriages are postponed because both partners feel that if they get into marriage soon, that they wouldn't be able to evolve and to grow. We have to create tender and kind and loving societies that would allow the much earlier level of maturity and marriages and so forth taking place in a very different context than we have. The way that, for example, I envision it, the Baha'i community would become the extended family of the future. That things would change, that not everything that is the same as it is. So my advice is to frustrated young bachelors is that they reflect on two things. One is on their vision of themselves, who they are and what they want to achieve. And second, on the vision of the society that we want to create, and start working on it.
You mentioned the fourth kind of love to be the love of humanity for itself. And your acquaintance in that it would be fulfilled through
the love of God.
Yes.
Now, in the context with the love of man for woman, what if one's understanding of God is different than, per se, the person they love, and they have a different concept of God? And would that love be incomplete and therefore futile, or should they pursue that?
Well, that's also a very important question. The question is this: if a true love really can occur by a true love of God, therefore, what if the other partner doesn't believe in God? Then what you do? Let's talk about that a little bit more in practical ways. Just reflect upon the times that you're most close to your partners. Okay? It seems that one of the times that we are very close to our partners is when we both are working on something together. Okay? In other words, when we have a joint objective. In marriage, in the context of the marriage, that you see how the marriages stick together and stay together. The first few years, in our contemporary society, in many marriages, the husband and wife work constantly, day in, day out. They rush in the morning. In the morning, they get up, hi, honey, bye, honey. And then in the evening, they come and hi, honey, bye, honey, and go to sleep because they're so exhausted and tired. But they'd rather feel close to each other. And you say, what is the purpose? They say, well, we want to buy our first home. That's nice. Okay? So they buy first home, and they move into it and start fighting. What has happened is that the joint objective that they had, the mutual objective that they had, object of love, no longer is there. The home is bought. Okay? So these are not conscious. These are just happens. Then they say, okay, let's do something else that brings us together. So what is the something else? Have a baby, of course. Okay? So they have a baby. Okay? And then that brings them together. So they gradually raise children. And they work hard and they have difficult times and they fight and argue, but nevertheless, they stay together. And many a times you ask them why. They say, for the sake of children. Okay? They stay together. And then there are other reasons that people stay together. Money, status, what the family would think, and the whole thing. Okay, there are all kinds of reasons. But people stay together because they have a mutual object that they love. A condition that they love for another. Okay? Now, because love between two individuals is so much related to the mutual object of love, then it goes with it that the more sublime, the more remarkable, the more all-encompassing, the more enlightened, the more everything that object of love is, the more that love would be in relationship, to that. Therefore, if your mutual love object is to have a house, eventually you will achieve it. It's limited. It's temporary. If it is to have children, likewise. You would have the children come and go, and it's temporary. If it is each other, that's temporary. Because ultimately, if everything goes right, still you're going to die. But if the two of you that's what I understand, at least partially, from what Abdul Baha says, that when the object of love becomes that reality that encompasses all realities, Okay? Then that. So if we follow that argument, then the issue is not the discussion of whether somebody believes in God or not. Because everybody believes in that which is beautiful, in that which is just, in that which is enlightened, in that which is marvelous and magnificent and so forth. And when you take that to the ultimate, then you're talking about God. You see, the reality is that all humanity are believing God. All humanity yearn for God. All humanity are constantly going towards God. The only thing is that they define their God in limited ways. And therefore their God becomes their fame, or being on television, or being nationalism, or racial issues, or ideological issues, or whatever it is. But these are all gods. These are false gods that people choose for themselves. That's the reason that this is one of the fundamental problems of humanity today. That humanity today has forgotten God, but has chosen all kinds of gods for itself, but has forgotten God. And you know what Muhammad said would happen to people who forget God? God will make them to forget themselves. And we have forgotten ourselves. Well, dear friends, one more question and then we have to stop. Yes?
Concerning the stages of love that should be passed until the issue of honor, conditional love, I couldn't mention having these different stages. If it goes into that higher stage, then anything concerning dislike or hatred will be justified. Because if man is made clear that they are passing through it, and then passing through it, this may be justified.
Yes.
Or we may not say that. Love in general is nothing conditional to love. Probably the best practice are the same about the number of Baha'i that he said, couples should give their love and their heart first to Baha'u'llah.
That's right. Well, that's the mutual object, yes.
And in that case, there is no condition on that.
Yes. Yes.
We have the love to Baha'u'llah. Then, instead of having that stages, they use that stages for strengthening and understanding of the teaching of Baha'u'llah that brings out to love.
Yeah. Okay. What you are doing here again, which is very legitimate, is combining the different kinds of love with different stages of love. But let me say one thing about the stages of love. Nothing in developmental processes are absolute. In other words, when we say we are going from one stage to another stage, that doesn't mean that you don't have some of the qualities of the various stages. At any given time, we have some kind of a blind dimension of the first stage of love, some kind of a competitive stage, some of the cooperative one, and some of the unconditional one. At any given stage, at all types, levels of our lives, we have it. The only thing is the predominant one. That at any given time, one of these is the predominant mode. But many of us, for example, that's the reason we live so many different lives. That's the reason that somebody from outside, everybody say he's such a magnificent person. He's so loving to all of his students, and he's so kind, and he's so excellent. And they say to the children of that man, aren't you lucky to have such a father, and so forth. And the child is with wide open eyes looking, because he sees this tyrant at home who beats him up all the time and so forth, and so wonders what this man is talking about, who they are talking about. So what they are talking about is that we behave differently and are capable of behaving differently in different levels and different conditions of our lives because of a number of reasons. So at any given time, all of those stages, to a certain degree, exist. But the predominant one is the one that we focus on and then hopefully add to it and go. But always we have it. Well, dear friends, there are many hands, and what time we have to stop? 5:30? Let's give it 10 minutes, okay? Oh, we have to go get children, okay? Thank you very much.